At precisely 1 minute past midnight, the familiar flicker of the royal seal illuminated television screens across the span of the Commonwealth. A nation, already on edge and expecting somber silence, was instead confronted with the image of King Charles III. He was clad in full ceremonial attire, a visual weight that seemed to drag down his already solemn eyes and heavy voice. What transpired in the next few moments was not merely unexpected, it was a seismic event that fractured the bedrock of modern royal history. For the first time in living memory, a reigning monarch broke with centuries of inviolable tradition to declare a queen consort in waiting. The name that passed his lips was not Camilla. It was Catherine, a chilling formality descended upon households across the United Kingdom as the king invoked a declaration clause lying dormant since the earliest, most precarious days of Queen Victoria's reign. His voice carried a slight tremor, born not of frailty, but of the immense historical gravity he was wielding. He articulated the phrase "Queen Consort in Waiting" with such deliberate, terrifying diction that senior advisors, watching helplessly from the shadows of palace corridors, reportedly drained of color. The sheer weight of that title, never before spoken in public, never hinted at in leaks, never anticipated by even the most astute observers, landed with the force of a thunderclap in the court of public opinion. By choosing the cover of darkness for this announcement, Charles had bypassed Parliament, bypassed tradition, and shattered expectation. There was no precedent for this moment, only raw, unwavering intent. The speech itself, a masterpiece of meticulous wording, echoed royal decrees long buried within the formidable Appendix Windsor IV, a shadow archive known only to the crown's innermost circle. Charles offered no apologies, no stumbling justifications. He simply stated a new reality. The crown required an heir to the consort's throne, a figure intrinsically aligned with the people, with continuity, and with the future stability of the realm. He named Catherine as that figure, elevating her instantly from Princess of Wales to the unprecedented status of Queen Consort in Waiting. Within the ancient walls of Windsor Castle, chaos unfurled in near real time. Sir Malcolm Braithwaite, the highly experienced Royal Communications Secretary, had received zero prior briefing, leaving his team paralyzed. Court advisors scrambled frantically to draft a clarifying statement, only to realize there was nothing to clarify. The king had spoken, etching his will into the annals of history with indelible ink. Yet, the most deafening noise in the palace that night was the silence emanating from Camilla's chambers. No aides entered, no staff exited. Her absence at breakfast the following morning was a void that spoke volumes, fueling whispers of a brutal power shift that surged through the palace like an unchecked wildfire. Outside the palace gates, the media landscape ignited. Emergency broadcasts obliterated scheduled programming as social media platforms lit up with frame-by-frame analyses of the address. Headlines screamed across the globe, a cacophony of confusion, intense speculation, and profound disbelief. Royal historians were dragged into emergency interviews, struggling to interpret a declaration that had no modern parallel while desperately trying to avoid missteps. The term Queen Consort in Waiting trended globally, recognized instantly not just as a novel title, but as a symbol of something far greater, a fundamental rupture, a reckoning, and a complete reordering of the monarchy's architecture. While the global public reeled from the shock, palace insiders knew this moment was the culmination of months of careful plotting behind sealed doors and heavy velvet curtains. Long before the midnight address stunned the world, a secret meeting had taken place deep within the palace's Blue Room, a space reserved for only the most critical transitions. Catherine had been summoned alone, without Prince William, a deviation from protocol that shook her to her core. It began with a handwritten note, delivered in silence by a royal courier, bearing no insignia, only her name. She arrived via the northern passage at dusk, escorted by a lone steward into air thick with expectation. There, beneath the imposing portrait of Queen Mary, sat King Charles. His hands were clasped, his face pale, but his eyes burned with an intensity she had never witnessed. There were no pleasantries, only a velvet folder laid between them labeled Appendix Windsor IV, a name whispered only once before by Princess, and as something sacred and binding. Charles spoke not as a king commanding a subject, but as a father-in-law and a monarch deeply aware of his legacy slipping into perilous uncertainty. His voice trembled with the burden of his request. He told her the monarchy stood at an existential crossroads. The crown required not just a passive figurehead, but an active beacon. He confessed that she, not Camilla, had risen to embody that necessary future. It was a plea laced with terrifying urgency. When Catherine, breath caught between duty and disbelief, finally asked the question that cut through the sacred text like a blade, "What about Camilla?" The room went still. Charles's answer was a revelation that rewrote decades of history. "She was never meant to carry the crown past me. She was my companion. But you are the nation's compass now." Those words collided with years of loyalty and buried personal conflicts. Catherine had never sought this power, yet here it was, laid before her, cloaked in the heavy burdens of legacy. After minutes that stretched like hours, Charles slid the folder across the table. She didn't promise, but she didn't walk away. The Blue Room kept it secret, but the Firestorm building behind closed doors could not be contained because someone else had discovered the plan, and they were determined to burn it down. When Camilla discovered the betrayal, it wasn't through official channels, but a devastating leak. A trusted senior member of the Royal Ceremonial Office had erroneously forwarded a classified update containing the explosive language of elevation. When the words "Queen Consort-in-Waiting" landed in Camilla's lap, they were not just a shock, they were an unforgivable emotional treachery. Her reaction was volcanic. Storming unannounced into the king's private study, a fury she hadn't unleashed in years absorbed by the ancient walls, she demanded, "Am I your wife or your placeholder?" Charles, already fragile from the internal pressures, offered only ambiguity worse than rejection. "It's not about removing you. It's about preserving them." Camilla, who had fought tooth and nail for her place, recoiled. She didn't weep, she warned. She declared that if this proceeded without formal debate, she would vanish instantly without notice or compromise. A secret emergency council, including Prince Edward, Princess, and constitutional scholars, convened to manage the fallout, contemplating the unthinkable collapse of traditional order. Charles remained visibly drained, haunted by the reality that his historic decision was tearing the family apart from within. Outside, paparazzi captured images of Camilla leaving Windsor under heavy tint, her posture unmistakably broken, fueling global speculation. The Queen was enraged, wounded, and dangerous. Yet, while Camilla raged, another power center quietly realigned, tipping the scales permanently. Princess Anne stepped forward, armed with the Clarion Protocols, dusty but ironclad documents hidden since the reign of George VI. These measures authorized the sovereign to name an heir consort when the current consort's role became unstable or contested, and argued with ruthless precision that all conditions were met. In a closed meeting, she read the defining clause, "The safety of the crown shall override the standing of any title." It silenced the room. In Catherine, Anne saw survival, a modern monarch who carried duty without scandal. Later, in a private garden conversation, Anne delivered the final blow to William's lingering doubts. "She's ready. And you know it." From that moment, the palace machinery shifted with terrifying efficiency. A shadow reign began. Camilla's staff, her private secretary, stylist, and advisors, resigned en masse following a spine-chilling memo regarding the reevaluation of former consort structures. It was a calculated purge. Camilla's wing of the palace fell into an eerie silence, a locked archive of a fading era, while Catherine's burgeoning protocol team absorbed the workload. William voiced concerns about the emotional toll on his wife as she navigated the crumbling foundations of one queen while being groomed for a burning throne, but the momentum of destiny was uncontrollable. The king then made an even bolder move, thrusting Catherine into the ceremonial spotlight. At a secret, closed-door rehearsal at Westminster, Catherine appeared wearing the Empress Eugenie diadem, a crown heavy with imperial history and not worn in generations. It was a de facto anointing, a prophecy fulfilled before stunned onlookers. Royal historians present recognized the immense symbolism. This was no mere rehearsal. Camilla's absence was total, her name blank in the logbook, her robe untouched. When Catherine descended the steps, diadem gleaming, she was no longer just the Princess of Wales. She was the imminent future. The inevitable confrontation between the two women took place behind the sealed doors of Windsor's East Wing, brokered with surgical precision by Princess Anne. It was raw and unrecorded.